It wasn't supposed to end like this. When Ella first mentioned the party, I didn't think much of it. We'd been married long enough for me to recognize her usual patterns. Another night out with Chloe and her friends, some drinks, maybe a little dancing. Nothing extravagant, or at least that's what I'd always assumed. But this time, something about the way she brought it up felt off. Maybe it was the nonchalant way she slipped it into our conversation, or the fact that Chloe had a talent for throwing parties that people ended up whispering about for all the wrong reasons. I tried not to overthink it, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. I knew Ella too well to miss the subtle signs. She'd been acting distant lately, distracted in a way that didn't make sense. The late nights, the vague excuses, I'd raised it before, and it always ended in an argument. But this time, it wasn't just jealousy or frustration that was eating at me. It was something deeper, like we were teetering on the edge of losing something that was too important to risk. The night before the party, I finally spoke up. "I don't think you should go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not that I don't trust you, Ella. It's just, I don't know. Something feels wrong. Like we're drifting apart, and I can't ignore it." Her reaction blindsided me. "Here you go again," she snapped, her eyes narrowing with that familiar mix of irritation and superiority. "It's just a party, for God's sake. Chloe's throwing it, not some random stranger. Why do you always have to make everything into a problem?" That word always hit me like a slap. She made it sound like I was this overbearing, suspicious husband, always hovering over her every move. But that wasn't the truth. I'd given her space, trusted her, believing our marriage was strong enough to handle anything. But lately, she'd grown so emotionally and physically distant, it felt like she was slipping away piece by piece. "I'm not trying to control you," I said, struggling to keep my cool. "I'm just telling you how I feel. Something about this party doesn't sit right with me. Can we at least talk about it?" She rolled her eyes, dismissing me like my concerns were nothing more than petty insecurities. "Talk about what? You're acting like I'm gonna leave you for some guy the second I walk out the door. It's just a night out, nothing more." But it wasn't just a night out. It was everything. The growing distance between us, the excuses, the way she seemed to be checked out. I could feel her slipping away, and this party felt like the breaking point. But instead of standing my ground, I let it slide. I don't know why. Maybe I was just exhausted. Exhausted from the endless arguments, from feeling like I was the only one trying to hold things together, while she seemed so ready to pull away without a second thought. So when she left that night, I didn't stop her. But I couldn't stay still either. Hours ticked by, and I found myself pacing the house, my mind racing. The silence was suffocating. By midnight, there still hadn't been a word from her. No call, no text, just the cold, empty house pressing down on me. Finally, I made a choice, one I knew I couldn't undo. I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app we'd installed ages ago, back when she'd kept misplacing her phone. Felt wrong, almost invasive, but in that moment I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed the truth, whatever it was, even if it hurt. The app loaded, and her location appeared on the screen. I was expecting to see her at Chloe's house, or maybe at a bar nearby. But instead, the dot blinked over a motel on the edge of town. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A motel? What the hell was she doing there? A wave of anger and dread slammed into me. This wasn't just a party anymore. Something else was going on. Something I hadn't wanted to face until now. Without another moment's hesitation, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The drive to the motel felt like it took forever, even though it was probably only 20 minutes. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel my knuckles ached, and my heart thudded louder with each passing mile. I kept glancing at my phone, watching the little dot that marked Ella's location. It hadn't moved. She was still there. Part of me wanted to turn around, to convince myself that I hadn't seen what I thought I saw. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. The distance between us wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just work stress or bad timing. No, this was something much darker. When I finally pulled into the motel parking lot, I made sure to park far enough away so I wouldn't be spotted. The place was a dump. a spot for people who didn't want to be seen. Cheap, discreet, and perfectly suited for hiding secrets. The flickering neon sign for Westmore Motel buzzed in the darkness, casting a weak, sickly light over the rundown building. I checked the app again, my thumb hovering over the screen, almost like I was hoping for it to show me something different. But the blinking dot hadn't moved. She was still here, holed up in one of those rooms. There weren't many to choose from. I stepped out of the car, the cold night air doing nothing to calm the tremble in my chest. My breath was shaky, shallow. Every step felt heavier than the last as my mind spiraled through every worst-case scenario. Images of Ella with someone else, laughing, smiling, doing things she hadn't done with me in months. Her car was parked at the far end of the lot, tucked into a shadowy corner like she was trying to hide it. That was all the confirmation I needed. My stomach twisted, and I felt the weight of it all crash over me as I stared at her car. This was real. This was happening. There were no more excuses, no more pretending. She was here, at a motel, and there was no way to explain that away. The trust we'd built between us was gone, shattered into a million pieces I didn't even want to look at. As I neared the room closest to her car, room 214, I felt my fists ball at my sides. The blinds were pulled tight, but the faint glow of a lamp bled through the cracks. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Did I really want to see this? Did I want to know what was on the other side of that door? Yes. There was no going back now. I raised my hand to knock, but stopped short, my fingers just inches from the door. Instead, I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch any sound. Anything at all. At first, there was nothing but silence, and I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. But then I heard it. Her laugh light and soft, like she didn't have a care in the world. And then a man's voice, muffled but unmistakable. That was all I needed. Rage exploded inside me. I didn't need to hear more. Without thinking, I slammed my fist against the door, hard and loud. The voices inside immediately stopped, replaced by the sound of frantic movements, whispers, and that unmistakable panic. The kind of panic that confirmed everything I hadn't wanted to admit. My body shook with adrenaline, my mind whirling with a storm of anger and betrayal. I banged on the door again, harder this time, demanding answers I already knew. The door cracked open, just wide enough for me to see her face. Ella stood there, pale and wide-eyed, her messy hair and smudged makeup painting a picture of guilt she couldn't hide. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, scrambling for a lie that couldn't come fast enough. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low, her eyes darting around like she was scared someone might catch us. I didn't care who was watching anymore. "What am I doing here? What the hell are you doing here?" I shot back, shoving the door open further. That's when I saw him, a man I didn't recognize, sitting on the edge of the bed, frozen, like he didn't know whether to run or stay. The rumpled sheets told me everything I needed to know. Ella stepped out quickly, trying to shield me from the full scene by pulling the door shut behind her. She was desperate. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, her voice trembling. But her eyes told a different story. She was already trying to spin her way out of it, trying to control the narrative. I laughed, bitter, hollow. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it is." The weight of her betrayal crushed me, and in that moment, it hit me like a freight train. After everything, after all the chances I'd given her, this was how she repaid me. She reached out, grabbing for my arm like touching me could somehow calm the storm inside. "Let me explain," she pleaded, her voice shaking with desperation. I yanked my arm away, disgust coursing through me. "Explain? Explain what, Ella? You're in a motel with him." My voice was sharp, each word cutting through the air, laced with the betrayal I could no longer ignore. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, she couldn't weave a story, couldn't dodge the truth. And that's when it hit me. I knew. It was over. There was nothing left to salvage. Her hand dropped to her side, and her expression shifted from shock to something colder, harder. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she'd been caught. The man in the room hadn't even bothered to come out, still sitting there like a coward, hoping I'd just walk away before things got even worse. "This isn't what you think," Ella said, her voice trying to sound calm, like she could still salvage some control. "We should talk. Let's go somewhere and figure this out." "Talk?" I spat, my voice rising in disbelief. "What the hell is there to talk about, Ella? You're standing outside a motel room with another man, while I've been at home, worrying myself sick, thinking it was something wrong with us. And now you're here, proving I was right all along." She glanced nervously at the door, at him, then back at me, panic flickering across her face. She was scrambling for something, anything, to downplay the magnitude of what she'd just done. "It's not what you think," she muttered, her voice quieter now, like she thought I might believe it if she said it enough. "Things haven't been right between us for a while. I didn't know how to handle it. I came here to clear my head." "To clear your head?" I shot back, my voice thick with disbelief. "Is that what you're calling this now? I don't need your excuses, Ella. You're caught. Don't insult me by pretending this is anything but what it is." She stepped closer, her tone softening, like she thought she could talk her way out of it. Her eyes were wide, a mix of guilt and manipulation, as if she could pull me back in with a few well-chosen words. "I'm sorry, okay? I know I messed up, but we can work through this. Let's go somewhere and talk about it. Please." Her words sounded empty, like the hollow echo of something even she didn't believe. I shook my head, the anger and disbelief crashing over me in waves. "Work through this? How, Ella? How do you fix this? You've been lying to me for months, disappearing, making excuse after excuse. I've been sitting at home, blaming myself for everything, while you've been out here doing God knows what." Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice softened, almost pleading. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't think it would go this far." "Go this far?" I repeated, incredulous. "Ella, it went too far the moment you chose to lie to me. The moment you stepped into that room, you made your choice. And it wasn't us." She opened her mouth, likely to plead again, but I cut her off before she could get the words out. "Was it worth it?" I asked, my voice quieter now, not from calm, but from sheer exhaustion. I was drained, beaten down from carrying the weight of our failing marriage all on my own. "Was it worth destroying everything we had? Because I'm done fighting for someone who gave up months ago." She lowered her gaze, her facade cracking just enough for me to see the guilt in her eyes. But that guilt wasn't for me. It was for herself, for getting caught, for losing control of her tangled web of lies. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered again, her voice cracking. "I don't want this to be the end. Please, let's figure this out. I'll make it right." Her words didn't mean anything anymore. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the empty parking lot. "It was already over, Ella. The moment you lied, the moment you chose someone else over us, you ended it. There's nothing left to fix. You don't get to make it right now," I said, my voice quiet but firm. That's when the tears started. Whether they were real or just another attempt to manipulate me, I couldn't tell anymore. She stood there, dabbing at her eyes, trying to look remorseful, but it was too late for that. The damage was done. No amount of tears could erase what she'd done. All I felt now was cold, hollow resignation. "You need to leave," I said, my anger finally giving way to exhaustion. "Go back inside. Do whatever you want, but don't come home. We're done." Her head shook frantically, panic flooding her face. "Please don't say that. Don't just throw us away like this." I felt the anger rise again, surging through me one last time, hotter and more intense than before. "Throw us away?" I repeated, my voice sharper now, edged with all the anger I hadn't let myself feel until that moment. "You already did that. I'm just finishing what you started." Without waiting for her to say another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see her tears or her fake regret. I got into my car, and as I gripped the steering wheel, the full weight of everything hit me all at once. It was over. Years of marriage, years of love, years of trust. Gone in the span of a single night. Now, at least the truth was out. The fight was over. As I cruised through the quiet streets, the adrenaline started to wear off, leaving only a deep, aching numbness. I didn't feel anger anymore or even betrayal. I just felt empty. I pulled into the driveway, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring at the house. It looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a house, a hollow shell where two people had drifted apart, pretending for far too long that everything was fine. I stayed in the car for a while, running everything over in my mind, knowing that once I walked inside, nothing would ever be the same. I stayed there longer than I should have, replaying the last few months in my head, searching for the moments I should have seen coming. The late nights with no explanations. The way she'd come home acting like nothing was wrong, when I could feel the distance growing between us with every passing day. The times I'd reached out, tried to reconnect, and she'd shut me down, dismissing my concerns like they were nothing. How long had she been cheating? How long had she been lying to my face? There was no point in being angry anymore. The truth was, I'd lost her a long time ago. I was just too stubborn to admit it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to open the door and step out of the car. I walked toward the house. I tossed my keys onto the counter and stood there in the kitchen. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. She'd be back soon, I thought. The argument at the motel had been raw, brutal, but I knew Ella. She wouldn't just vanish. She'd come back, try to explain, try to convince me it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But I was done. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and slumped onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall as I took a long swig. I needed something, anything, to numb the ache. My mind drifted back to the night we first moved into this house. We'd been married for 2 years, still in that blissful honeymoon phase when everything felt right. I remembered how excited Ella had been. We spent hours unpacking, laughing, dreaming about the future. We had plans, big plans. Kids, trips, a life we'd build together. That felt like a different lifetime. Now, all I could see was the look on her face when she opened that motel door. The panic, the guilt, the desperate lies. Even when she was caught, red-handed, she still tried to spin the story, still tried to convince me there was something worth salvaging. But there was no going back. Not after this. The front door creaked open, and I heard her footsteps as she came inside. She paused in the hallway, probably unsure if I was still there. I didn't move, didn't say anything. I just waited. She walked into the living room, looking different, pale, eyes swollen from crying. The weight of what she'd done seemed to have finally sunk in. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. She sat down in the chair across from me, keeping a safe distance. For a long moment we sat in silence. Finally, she whispered, her voice shaky, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I didn't even look at her. I just took another sip of my beer, letting the silence stretch between us until it felt suffocating. "What is there to talk about?" I asked, my voice cold and detached. "You've already said enough." She looked down at her hands, wiping at her eyes. "I know I messed up, but I swear, it wasn't what it looked like. Couldn't help it." I laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. "It wasn't what it looked like? Ella, I caught you in a motel room with another man. How much worse could it possibly get?" "It was a mistake," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking straight. I was scared. I didn't know how to fix things between us. And I made a terrible mistake," she added, her voice trembling. "But it's not what you think." I finally turned to face her, my eyes sharp and unwavering. "You cheated, Ella. You lied. And now, even after all of this, you're still lying. Just admit it. Stop twisting this into something it's not." She flinched at my words, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm not lying," she whispered. "I know it looks bad, but it was a one-time thing. It didn't mean anything. I was lost, and I didn't know how to tell you." Her excuses didn't faze me. The anger inside me wasn't fiery anymore. It was cold, solid, the kind of anger that sets in when you realize you've hit the wall. It's over, Ella, I said, setting my beer down with a finality that left no room for negotiation. There's no fixing this. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Her head shook violently, and panic crept into her voice. Please don't say that. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I stood up slowly. You already lost me, I said, my back to her as I headed for the hallway. Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't turn around. The truth had been laid bare, and there was nothing left to fight for. I made my way to the bedroom and closed the door softly behind me. Her cries still echoed from the living room, but I blocked them out, sinking onto the edge of the bed. The weight of it all settled on me, heavy but oddly definitive. It wasn't the emotional explosion I'd imagined. It wasn't the raw heartbreak I expected. It was quiet, empty, like a hollow acceptance that this was really the end. The room around me felt colder, strange, as if it no longer belonged to me. My eyes drifted to the walls, taking in the photos and mementos that once represented a life we'd built together. Smiling faces from vacations, our wedding day, little tokens of a love that had once felt unbreakable. But now, it all seemed distant, like I was looking at someone else's life, someone else's memories. The weight of it all hit me. Those happy moments, frozen in time, felt hollow now. My gaze landed on a photo from our honeymoon, just the two of us on a beach, laughing like the world was ours to conquer. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? Or maybe it hadn't been quick at all. Maybe it had been unraveling for years, and I'd been too blind, too hopeful to see it. Ella's betrayal wasn't the beginning of the end. It was just the final nail in a coffin we'd been building together, slowly, over time. A soft knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I didn't answer, but she didn't wait for permission. Ella opened the door and stepped inside, her face streaked with tears, her features pale and strained with desperation. Can we just talk? Please. Her voice was barely a whisper, almost as if she were asking permission to speak. She lingered in the doorway, hesitant, like she already knew deep down that there was nothing left to say. I looked at her. This woman I had once loved so fiercely, the one I had planned a life with. Now all I could see was a stranger. Someone who had made choices that shattered everything I thought we were. Someone who had discarded everything we had built for a fleeting moment of selfishness. What's there left to talk about, Ella? My voice was flat, emotionless. Do you think a few more words are going to change anything? That somehow we can rewind and go back to what we had? We're past that. Way past it. She stepped inside, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. I know I ruined everything, she said, her voice trembling, full of guilt. But I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll end it with him. I swear. I cut her off, my voice sharper than I meant. You don't get to fix this, Ella. It's too late for promises. Don't leave, she pleaded, her voice raw with desperation. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling as she reached out, but I didn't move. I didn't want to touch her, didn't want her hands on me. Everything about her felt foreign now, tainted by the lies, by the betrayal. I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. You've already left, Ella. You've been gone for months. I just didn't see it until now. Her face twisted in pain, the tears flowing freely now. Please don't do this. Please don't go. I swear I'll make it right. I'll do anything. I shook my head, my chest tightening. You can't fix this. I'm done trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. She stepped forward again, her hands reaching for me, but this time I took a step back. I can't stay here and keep pretending, I said, my voice steady but laced with finality. I need to go. I need time to breathe without the weight of your lies suffocating me. The silence between us stretched long, her sobs now the only sound filling the room. But I couldn't be moved by them anymore. I'm leaving, Ella, I said again, the words firm, final. You need to figure out what you want, because I'm not part of it anymore. She sank to her knees, her hands pressed to her face, as if trying to hold herself together. But I was already halfway out the door, duffel bag in hand. I'm sorry, she whispered from behind me. Her voice cracked with emotion. I'm so sorry, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The door closed softly behind me as I stepped into the night, the weight of the decision settling over me. Maybe this was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was the right thing. It was over. She didn't try to stop me again, but I could hear her behind me, her sobs echoing through the quiet house as I made my way to the front door. I knew there was no turning back. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle, and glanced over my shoulder. Ella stood at the end of the hallway, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked small, broken, a shadow of the woman I once knew. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost went back to her, almost reached out and tried to comfort her, as I had so many times before. But I couldn't, not anymore. I had given her every chance. I had held on for too long, tried to fix what was beyond repair. The truth was, I wasn't walking out just for me. I was walking out for both of us. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped into the night. The cold air hit my face, sharp and cleansing, as I walked to my car. It felt like the weight of the world had lifted, but the emptiness still lingered in my chest. As I drove away, I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. No more rage, no more heartbreak, just a quiet, gnawing emptiness. Because in the end, the hardest part wasn't the leaving. It was knowing that I had loved her so completely, and yet it wasn't enough to save us. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. Not yet. What would I even say? Hey, I just walked out of my marriage and I'm staying in a cheap motel, feeling sorry for myself. It didn't seem right. I didn't want pity. I didn't want someone else's sympathy or words of comfort that would only remind me of how much I had lost. So, I just sat there, the silence of the room pressing in on me like a weight. It was strange, not hearing Ella's voice, not having her nearby. Even after everything, I realized how much I'd gotten used to her presence, to the idea of us. But the truth was, we hadn't been us for a long time. Maybe I'd just been too afraid to admit it. My phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. I almost didn't check it, but then I saw it was a message from my sister, Erin. You good? I hadn't talked to her in a while. She was the one person who always saw through my bullshit, the one who never sugarcoated things. But the thing was, I wasn't sure I was good. I wasn't sure I was anything. I typed a quick reply, keeping it vague. Yeah, just need some space. I'll explain later. I didn't want to get into it with her. Not tonight. I needed to figure out what came next, what my life even looked like now that Ella and I were over. The future felt as blank as the motel walls in front of me. I tossed my phone onto the bed and lay back, staring at the stained ceiling. The fluorescent light buzzed softly above me, but it didn't seem to matter. All I could think about was how everything had changed so suddenly, how quickly love could turn into something cold, something unrecognizable. And I couldn't help but wonder, how long had Ella been feeling this way? How long had she been planning this? The thought made my stomach turn, but I knew there was no point in torturing myself with questions I'd never get answers to. At some point, exhaustion began to weigh on me, my eyelids heavy as the room seemed to spin slowly around me. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do tomorrow or the day after that. All I knew was that tonight, I couldn't go back to that house, to that life. The bed in this motel was as uncomfortable as it looked, but it was all I had for now. It was the only place where I could hide from everything I couldn't change. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. It never does when your world feels like it's falling apart. I had no idea how long I lay there, but eventually, the exhaustion won out, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. I woke up hours later, my body stiff and sore, the room still dark except for the dim glow of the TV, which was still flickering in the corner. I checked my phone, no new messages. This was my life now. There was no going back, no fixing what was broken. But the hardest part wasn't the end. It was the silence after. The realization that the person you loved, the person you thought you knew better than anyone, had become a stranger. That you had given everything you had, and it wasn't enough. I grabbed my phone again and typed out a quick message to Erin. I'll be okay. I just need some time. I'll talk to you soon. It was all I could give her for now. All I could give anyone. Hey, Ree. Yeah, it's been a rough night, I said, my voice sounding raw even to my own ears. Ryan was quiet for a beat, probably processing the tone in my voice. What happened? I laughed bitterly, the sound more like a half-choked exhale than anything resembling humor. Yeah, I think I might be done with Ella. There was a long pause, and then Ryan's voice was softer. You want to talk about it? I wasn't sure how to even start. How do you explain everything that's gone wrong when you can't even wrap your own head around it? I don't know. She's been lying to me, man, for months, and I just caught her tonight with someone else. Ryan's silence on the other end of the line was heavy, like he was processing it, trying to figure out what to say. He had always been the kind of guy who thought things through before speaking, and it was one of the reasons I trusted him so much. After a few seconds, he finally spoke. Shit, that's tough, man. I'm really sorry you're going through this. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but that didn't make it any easier. Yeah, well, it is what it is, right? I can't change what happened, I said, leaning back against the wall, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't know what the hell to do next. She wants me to forgive her. She keeps saying it was a mistake, but I trailed off, running a hand over my face. Can you? Ryan asked, his voice quieter now, as if he understood the weight of that question. I closed my eyes, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. I don't even know if I want to. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. But this is different. This is like a fucking tidal wave, and I'm drowning in it. I'm sorry, man, Ryan said again, his voice low but firm. You don't deserve that. I swallowed hard, trying to force back the knot that had formed in my throat. I just don't get it, Ree. How does it get to this point? How does someone who used to be your best friend, your partner, how does she just throw it all away? Like it was nothing? Ryan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his tone was more measured. People don't just do that, you know? There's always something under the surface. Maybe she was struggling. Maybe she was unhappy. Maybe she felt like you weren't seeing her. But he paused, letting the words sink in. It's no excuse for what she did. But people don't cheat without there being some sort of reason behind it that I think you need to figure out if you can look past it, or if you even want to. I don't know, I said. It doesn't feel like something that can just be fixed with an apology. Trust doesn't come back from this. And the thing is, even if she swears it's over with him, I'll never really believe her again. Ryan sighed softly. I get it. I'm not saying you have to forgive her. But don't make any big decisions when you're this pissed off. Just give yourself some space to breathe, man. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I rubbed my eyes, the exhaustion of the past few hours catching up to me again. I know. I don't want to go back to that life. I don't know what's next, Ree. It all feels so messed up. I thought we had this future together. And now, it's just gone. Yeah, Ryan said quietly. It sucks, but you're gonna get through this. And you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you, man. If you need to vent or crash at my place or just get away from all of it, you can come by anytime. I let out a breath, feeling something shift in my chest. Maybe it was the first time in hours I didn't feel completely alone in this. Thanks, man. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ryan chuckled softly. You'd probably do a hell of a lot better than you think. But I'll take the credit anyway. Just know I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready to talk or whatever, you're not in this by yourself. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I'll keep that in mind. We talked for a few more minutes, mostly about nothing important. By the time we hung up, I felt a little lighter, like the first step toward figuring out what I was supposed to do next had been taken. But it was still a long road ahead, and I wasn't sure where it would lead that I took the coffee, the warmth of it seeping into my hands, grounding me in the moment. I let out a long, shaky breath before meeting Ryan's gaze. For the first time since everything had gone to hell, I felt like maybe, just maybe, someone might actually understand. I started slow, almost reluctant. It started with little things, small moments where she'd be distant, distracted. I kept telling myself it was just stress, Or we were going through a phase. I paused, running a hand through my hair, the frustration bubbling up again. But it wasn't a phase, Ryan. She wasn't just pulling away from me. She was already gone. And I was too blind to see it. Ryan nodded. And then last night, I couldn't avoid it. The words had to come out, even if they tasted like acid. I found her, in a motel, with some guy. I don't even know who he is, or if he's been there before, but it doesn't matter, does it? My voice cracked again, and I had to swallow back the sting in my throat. Ryan leaned back, his expression hardening. God, man, that's brutal. I nodded, the memories rushing back like a flood I couldn't stop. She didn't even try to deny it at first. She just froze. And when she finally spoke, she started with the excuses. How it was a mistake, how she was lost, and how she didn't know how to fix things between us. But it's all bullshit. That's what kills me. She didn't want to fix it. She was already done, and I was too damn stupid to see it. Ryan's face softened, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed everything I was saying. That's the thing about betrayal, man. It's not just about what they did. It's about the fact that they were already checked out before it even happened. They're already done with you in every way that matters, and then they just leave you there to pick up the pieces. And it fucks with your head. Makes you second-guess everything you thought you knew. I gripped my coffee mug harder, feeling the heat of it seep into my palms. I gave her everything. I trusted her. And she just threw it all away. All the years, all the plans. Gone. Like it never even mattered. The bitterness of it was suffocating. But I couldn't stop talking. Couldn't stop myself from venting all the things I'd kept bottled up. Ryan sat there, silent for a few moments, just letting me unload. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but firm. You're right. She threw it all away. But you're not throwing it away, man. You're walking away from the wreckage, and that's a hard thing to do. But it's the only thing you can do. You don't need to keep holding on to something that's already broken beyond repair. I let out a ragged breath, leaning back in the booth. It felt almost impossible to imagine a future where I didn't carry this pain with me, but Ryan's words, they made sense. I had to stop holding on to something that was already gone. But that didn't make it any easier. I don't know what's next, I said, the weight of it settling in my chest again. I don't know how to start over. I feel like I've lost my belief that anything could stay good for long enough to matter. Ryan picked up his coffee again, his eyes never leaving mine. You don't have to figure it all out today. It's okay to just breathe. But you've already taken the hardest step. You're out of there. And that's huge, man. You're going to find a way through this. I swallowed hard, not sure if I believed him, but not willing to give up on the possibility either. Yeah, I need to stop thinking about what could have been and start thinking about what is. But it's hard, you know? She's still texting me. She's still trying to reach out, begging for another chance. And part of me still wants to go back to the way things were. But I can't. I can't let her keep doing this to me. Ryan shook his head slowly, his expression serious. You're not going to fix this, man. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And from what you've told me, she's shown you who she really is. I nodded, trying to absorb what he was saying. The idea of truly letting go, of accepting that the person I thought I knew was gone forever, it was terrifying. But it also felt like the only way forward. I know, I said quietly. I know. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, though. Felt more like an understanding. Ryan broke the silence after a while, his voice lightening just a touch. So, what's next for you? Got any plans, or are you just winging it for now? I laughed softly, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. Right now, I don't have a clue, but I think I need to take some time to figure it out. Get out of town for a little while, maybe. Clear my head. Ryan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Yeah, that's probably a good call. Whatever you need, man. I'm here. For the first time since the night had begun, I felt a little more certain about something, about moving forward, even if it was just one small step at a time. It wouldn't be easy. Hell, it might not even be quick. But I had to trust that eventually, I would get there. And I wouldn't be doing it alone. That I watched Ryan walk to his car, the weight of the conversation still lingering in the air around me. The words he'd said, "You're stronger than you think," kept repeating in my head, but they felt like something I wasn't sure I could believe. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was the ability to keep moving forward. I got back in my car and sat there for a minute, my mind a swirl of fragmented thoughts. I wondered if I would ever feel normal again, or if this feeling of being untethered would always be my new reality. But I couldn't stay in the haze. I couldn't let Ella's betrayal define me. I had to figure out what came next, what I needed to do for myself. I drove back to the house. The street looked the same, the trees lining the sidewalk swaying in the wind like they had every other day. But everything inside me felt different. The house was no longer a home. It was a cage, a place where the life I had once imagined for myself was slowly disintegrating. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, just staring at the house. I could already picture Ella inside, her face streaked with tears, trying to call me or text me again. She was probably still waiting for some miracle, some sign that I'd come back. But I wasn't going to do that. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat, took a deep breath, and walked toward the front door. One day at a time that I stood there, just inside the door, looking at Ella. She was trying so hard to hold it together, but the cracks were visible. The way her hands fidgeted with her phone, the redness around her eyes. It wasn't the kind of devastation that would move me anymore. Not after everything. I didn't say anything at first. The silence between us was thick. Finally, I spoke, my voice low but firm. "You don't get to act surprised, Ella. You don't get to sit there like I'm some kind of villain for leaving. You broke everything." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she looked down at her hands. "I know," she whispered. "I know I hurt you. I never meant for it to get this bad." Her voice wavered, but it didn't change the truth of what she had done. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite the pain still lingering. "You didn't mean for it to get this bad. But you did it anyway." "I'm not here to talk about what happened," I said, cutting through the silence. "I'm here to take my things." She flinched at my words, but I didn't feel the need to soften them. There was nothing left to soften. "You're leaving," she said, more a statement than a question. I nodded, my gaze never leaving hers. "I'm not coming back, Ella. I don't know what you thought, but it's over. For good." Her lip trembled as she stood up, slowly, as though she was afraid I'd disappear if she didn't move carefully. "Please," she begged, her voice small. "Please don't do this. I know I can't change what I did, but She stopped herself, closing her eyes like she was trying to contain the storm inside her. "I love you. I don't want to lose you." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me without meaning to. "Love? You don't love me. You love the idea of me, the me that was there when it was easy, when you could lie and pretend everything was okay. But when it came down to it, you chose someone else." I could feel the anger rising again, but it wasn't the same kind of anger as before. It wasn't wild or reckless. It was sharp, cold, calculated, like a sharp knife through flesh. "You made your choices, Ella. Now I'm making mine." She took a step forward, eyes wide, hands reaching out like she wanted to touch me, like there was still a chance. "Please," she repeated, her voice cracking. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll end it with him. I'll go to therapy, I swear. We can fix this." I stared at her outstretched hands, her pleading face. The desperation in her eyes was something I had seen before, in other broken things. But I couldn't care. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the air like glass. "You don't get to fix this. I'm done." She dropped her hands, her face crumpling as fresh tears fell. But they didn't reach me anymore. There was no part of me that still wanted to save her. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I had made my choice. She had made hers. Now it was time to face what came next. I opened the door to the bedroom and started gathering the rest of my things. It wasn't much, just a few more clothes and personal items. I met her gaze, but it didn't feel like I was looking at the woman I once loved. It felt like I was looking at a stranger, someone who had deceived me for so long that I couldn't even see the person behind the apology anymore. "I don't need your apology, Ella," I said, my voice low, controlled. "It doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered, voice cracking. I wanted you to know I never meant for it to go this far." I didn't respond. What was there to say? She hadn't meant for any of it, but it happened anyway. She had taken something from me that couldn't be returned. I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder, and turned toward the door. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. "Goodbye, Ella," I said, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a lie. As I stepped out the door, I heard her voice behind me, faint but clear, a final plea. "Take care of yourself." I didn't turn back. There was no point. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality I hadn't expected, and I felt the weight of it settle into my bones. It wasn't relief. It wasn't closure. It was something colder, something that felt like the beginning of a new life, a life that didn't involve her. I walked to my car. The past few months had been building to this moment, but even so, I hadn't expected it to feel like this, numb, hollow, like there was nothing left of the life I'd once known. I got into the car and started the engine, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. I had no idea where I was going, or what came next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there. Not in that house, not in that life. I drove aimlessly through the streets. I thought about what Ryan had said earlier. "You'll get through this. You're stronger than you think." It didn't feel true yet. I wasn't sure I believed it. But maybe, just maybe, it would be one of those things I'd have to take on faith. Like everything else. The future was uncertain, but it was mine now. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to look back. I didn't feel like I had to fix anything. I just had to move forward. So I did. The stillness of the motel room was almost suffocating, but I didn't mind. It felt like a cocoon, a place where I could exist without the weight of the past pressing down on me. The bed wasn't comfortable, but it didn't matter. I wasn't there for comfort. I was there to figure out what came next. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the corner, the low buzz of the overhead light. Everything about this room felt transient. It wasn't home. It wasn't anywhere. But it didn't have to be. I turned over in bed, the sheets twisted around my legs, and stared at the blank wall in front of me. I thought about Ella, about everything we'd shared, and I realized something. I didn't miss her. Not in the way I thought I would. Not in the way I'd spent the past months longing for things to get better. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. In that quiet motel room, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in years. Self-respect. I hadn't been living for myself for a long time. I'd been living for the idea of what we could be. And when that idea crumbled, I'd let it take me down with it. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let myself stay in that cycle of self-doubt, guilt, and regret. Ella had chosen her path, and now I was choosing mine. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to have all the answers. I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the noise in my head, but one thought kept nagging at me. A question I hadn't let myself ask in a long time. Who am I now? The man who had been married to Ella? That version of me was gone. The man who had trusted her, built a life with her, fought for their future? He was buried under the weight of betrayal and broken promises. But that was okay. I didn't need to be him anymore. I wasn't sure who I was yet, but I knew I was going to find out. I had no choice now, and somehow that realization was liberating. The past was over. Ella was in the past. The love I'd thought we had, the dreams we'd built together, they were all in the past. But the future was mine. Tomorrow I would figure out the next steps. Maybe I'd reach out to a lawyer. Maybe I'd start looking for a place of my own. There were practical things to do, but there was also something deeper. Something I hadn't even begun to touch. I drifted into sleep, not peacefully, but with a sense of quiet resolve. I wasn't sure how I was going to rebuild my life, but at least I was finally ready to try. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. It was over. And somehow, I felt a strange sense of peace in that.